Universities are warning the $18 billion overseas student sector is in danger of collapse due to the strong dollar, changes to student visas and well-publicised violent attacks. Some universities say their international enrolments are down by up to 30% in some instances and are calling for action. Today the Reserve Bank even acknowledged the impact of the strong Australian dollar on the sector. Educators say that's a factor, but single out changes to visa requirements as the main influence on the decline in Australia's fourth biggest industry. Hamish Fitzsimmons reports.
It's an $18 billion industry many believe is heading for disaster.
If this was General Motors and this were its car plants in Melbourne and 300 plus people were being let go, we'd have every minister from the Prime Minister down talking about how to fix this.
Education is Australia's fourth largest export earner after iron ore, coal and gold. Now Australian universities are reporting declines of up to 30% in enrolments by full fee paying international students. And senior university figures are warning of a collapse in the sector.
I think it's snuck up on Australians a little. People don't realise that about 125,000 people in terms of full-time equivalent jobs are employed in this sector. It's very important in some regions and some cities.
One factor is the high Australian dollar. With projections of 3 years of parity ahead of us, studying in Australia is becoming more expensive.
In China, that is playing out as a factor. China's our major source country for students.
Chinese students make up about 2/3 of the almost 300,000 overseas students in Australia. The drop in numbers from China has alarmed the federal government to the point that Tertiary Education Minister Chris Evans visited there 2 weeks ago with a high-level delegation from Australian universities. The group included Professor Ross Milburn from UTS.
We heard constantly was concerns from China about our visa processing, the time it took to get visas, the cost of the visas and the amount of funding that students needed to be able to guarantee before they could apply for a visa.
Senior figures at universities say the federal government's change to student visa requirements is the biggest factor in the decline of international student enrolments.
Processing is slower and the restrictions, the regulations that govern whether you get a student visa have become much tougher, so less students are getting through the gate.
A student visa now costs $500 and can take up to 3 months to be approved. Students also need to have $140,000 in the bank, up to 3 times the amount required by countries like the US and Canada.
If we could only change one thing, we would change our visa policy.
Fred Hilmer believes the federal government is pandering to fear in the community about immigration.
People in Asia, and I've just come back from a visit to 7 major centres, people don't feel that they're welcome here. And we've got to really change our political rhetoric and get a much more civil and a sensible debate.
The Group of 8 Vice-Chancellor says it's a misguided assumption that people who come to study in Australia want to stay.
The overwhelming majority of students coming to our universities are coming here and then they're going back.
Violence against Indian students and Australia's ongoing debate about immigration and refugees is also having an impact.
The pattern of violence affecting South Asian students, Indians and Bangladeshis mainly, in Melbourne over the 3 years up to the beginning of this year has substantially harmed our reputation as a safe, secure and tolerant country in India.
In October, Monash University in Melbourne shocked other universities when it announced it would shed 300 staff and cut $45 million from its budget in response to international enrolments falling by 10%. No senior Monash staff would talk to Lateline, but other universities are alarmed at what's happening there and what it could mean for them.
I think the Monash decision or the Monash events are really a wake-up call.
Universities are reporting a 9% drop across the board in overseas enrolments. For example, Central Queensland University is expecting a 25% drop. Victoria University is reporting similar figures.
The middle of next year is a start of when we believe we will see the big drop starting to happen, and then for the next two or 3 years, the current projections are that's when it's really going to come home to hit us.
Higher education expert Simon Marginson believes most universities will lose revenue, but it will be the newer universities that rely on overseas enrolments who will be most affected, and that will be felt by all students.
The whole gamut of higher education functions will be affected by reductions in revenue on this scale, with the newer, lesser status universities being hit hardest, but some of our oldest and best universities also being affected, I think.
The federal government says it will announce the results of a review to student visas next month. Hamish Fitzsimmons, Lateline.